Hello, and welcome to the Old Soul Archaeology podcast. My name is Michelle Janae. Thank you for tuning in and listening. Are you ready to dig deep?
Hello, and welcome back to Old Soul Archaeology. This is Old Soul Sojourn, and today my guest is Dr. Sunil Raheja. Did I say that right?
You said it very well. I'm very impressed. Yeah.
Well, we did talk about it before, to be fair, but I wanted to make sure I got that right. Welcome to the podcast, and thank you for sojourning with us today.
And thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here and honored to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I just want to introduce you to our listening audience. Sunil, or Dr. Raheja, has worked as a psychiatrist for over 25 years, helping those stuck in complex psychological problems and circumstances. He now works as a psychiatrist and executive coach in private practice, where he helps bored and frustrated senior leaders who sense a disconnection between their outer and inner worlds find deeper meaning and fulfillment in their personal and professional lives. He himself has in life struggled with depression and burnout, and so personally knows what it is like to feel stuck. His unique Dancing with Wisdom coaching program unpacks this. Sunil has recently published his book, Dancing with Wisdom, a unique quest to restore meaning, purpose, and fun to your life and work. Actually, I think today is launch day as this podcast airs. Once again, congratulations and welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, you're absolutely right. It's an exciting time. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we like to talk about all things wisdom here. So one of the things about Old Soul Archaeology is really digging deep into inner wisdom. So I'm really excited to unpack, if we can use that term again, what your experience is with your own inner wisdom and how you bring that to your coaching practice. So let's just get right to the obvious. What personally made you want to write a book on wisdom?
If I were to give the answer in a few words about me personally, it's because I realize how often I've been foolish in my own life, how often I've lacked wisdom. Sometimes that's been through my own weakness, through my own negligence, sometimes through my own deliberate fault. And I mean, it goes back a long way because I came as an immigrant child from India to the UK, to England, many, many years ago, just literally as a toddler. But I came into an environment where my parents didn't know the culture very well. I certainly didn't know the culture. And so I stumbled my way through that, making lots of faux pas and mistakes, and really never feeling I fitted in. And so looking for wisdom in terms of how do I fit into with people around me? How do I make sense of life? And what I realized is that never went away. That's always been the case. And then realizing actually it's not just me, but we live in a world that's getting more and more challenging, complex, cynical, chaotic, and realizing actually that this is something that we all struggle with. That's in a sort of brief nutshell. That's what's got me fascinated. And I've sort of realized actually it's always been there at the back of my mind, and the word for it is actually wisdom.
Yeah. We're gonna get into the word wisdom here in just a minute, but I want to go back to a conversation that you and I had previously, and that was about your being an immigrant in the UK as a young boy with Indian heritage. You had mentioned to me that you felt when you were in the UK like India was your home, but when you went back to India, like the UK, so almost like you were walking between the two worlds. And I think wisdom is a great way to get into this when we talk about the earthly and the spiritual. But yes, you also mentioned that this is a universal story, which that isn't always portrayed in the media, right? That we can start to look at certain groups and how they're refugees or they're displaced or whatever, but it really is a universal story. Can you talk about how you came to that realization? Because I think that's really key, probably in your story and what you bring to your coaching, that this isn't just for a particular demographic of people, but maybe a larger psychographic.
Yes, it is fascinating. I suppose I should say as well that thinking about coming as an immigrant child, which would have been in the late 1960s, early 1970s, it was a very different world to what we have now in terms of the fact of the technology. Mm-hmm. So, if my parents wanted to make a phone call to India, that might cost a week's salary. You would talk for a minute or 2 minutes. That would be it. There was no internet connection. I mean, a completely different world. You were completely cut off from the country you came from. And I think we went to India every 4 years. And obviously that was in my formative years as well. So I think we went in 1973, 1977. But in between, apart from occasional letters, there was no communication with my family or and those Indian roots, unless very occasionally somebody might come over. And so there's this huge gap. And what that creates, as it were, is a kind of sort of fantasy in your own mind about what it must be like to be in the other country. And again, it was clear to me that growing up in the UK, I was told I had a very Indian name. I knew I didn't fit in. Most of my classmates were English or British. And it was very clear, India is your home. So I began building up in my own mind, oh, India is my home. That's where I belong. That's where I'm from. And so I'm very different from the people who are around me. But then eventually when I got to India, I'd forgotten all my Hindi. I could hardly speak the language. And everybody told me that I was English. And so that really thought, well, I'm not English. I'm not Indian. I don't fit. And, especially, when you're growing up, this desire to fit in is just so deeply rooted. I mean, what I've been struck by, though, many years later, is that, as you were saying earlier on, Michelle, is that it's everybody's experience. You could just say it's because my ears are slightly different from somebody else's, or my nose is not quite the right way, or it could be anything. But, the analogy I've heard is that, you've got major surgery and minor surgery. And obviously major surgery would be, heart bypass, or, getting a liver transplant. That's major surgery. And a minor surgery might be maybe having a blood test, or, getting an ingrowing toenail removed. The problem is that's all well and true objectively, but when it's your body, it's all major surgery because it's happening to you. So it's actually irrelevant, how big the issue is, because it's you and your personal experience. It's all significant. It's how you interpret it. It's how you look at it, how you think about it. So I struggled for many years, never feeling I fitted in, feeling, in a sense, feeling very, how can I put this? Feeling very proud of my Indian roots and my Hindu background, because I would look at Western society and culture and see the dysfunctional families, see all sorts of problems happening, and feeling somehow morally superior and thinking I was better. But actually, in many ways, I think that was a negative. That was a negative, because it was just pride and arrogance, really, when I look back at that. And then for me, I went to university at the age of 18, 19, and I sort of hit a brick wall in my life. And in terms of the fact that I'd done very well academically up to that point, and then I was struggling at medical school. I didn't feel I connected with the predominantly English people around me at university. I didn't feel they understood me, and the Indian people I did come across were, for me, were too westernized to me. I didn't fit in with them, and began to get more and more feel lonely. Went through a period what looked like depression, which I would interpret as depression now, and then had a very profound spiritual awakening at that point. And it was it was through that spiritual awakening, and that, just to talk about that as well, is that I'd have these heavy periods of depression that would descend over me, and I would really find it very hard to shake off. And then on a particular day, a thought came into my mind that if there's a God, he can lift that from you. And it was incredible. Something lifted, which convinced me of the power of God. And eventually I traced that back to an encounter with Christ. I've been going through different various churches. I knew nothing about Christianity. For me, it was all, whether it's Catholic or Protestant or Mormon or Jehovah's Witness, for me, it was all Christian as far as I was concerned. But there was something about the character of Christ and the fact that Jesus says, is that Jesus looks on the inside, not on the outside. And it's about a transformation from the inside out. And that so deeply resonated with me that I thought, okay, I want to follow Christ. And I began to read the Bible for myself. I'd never read it. I came to it completely green, no ideas what the biblical scripture said. But there's a passage in Hebrews which talks about Abraham looking for a city and never finding it because it was a heavenly one. And then it says in that passage, and I think it's Hebrews 12, it says, those people who say such things are not looking for an earthly home. They're looking for a spiritual one, and God has prepared a home for them. And I thought, wow, I so much resonate with that. I so much identify with that this longing for a home, and because what I didn't mention is that when I would go to India as I got older, I never felt at home there. And this realization, actually, all these deep longings and desires I've got will never be satisfied in this life. You know, C.S. Lewis talks about this in terms of, he says, like, if a duck wants to swim, there's such a thing as water. Is that there's such a thing as sexual desire, and there's such a thing as sex. You know, there's such a thing as hunger, and there's food. And then he says, if there's a desire within me that nothing in this world can fulfill, it must mean I was made for another world.
Mm.
So, wow, that's quite something. Yeah. I hope that answers your question. That was a long answer. It's a long answer, but I hope that was helpful.
but that in and of itself is so packed with wisdom. It is so beautiful, because having grown up in Christianity, we were raised Catholic, and I had traveled through Mormonism and then born again Christianity, and I've come actually to a more mystical. I love that you referred me in a previous conversation to Richard Rohr, because I think that his approach is very refreshing to me when I still am shaking off a lot of the bonds of a dogmatic Christianity that isn't. It's more external and physical, and not the kingdom of heaven is within you, which I think you're referring to some degree. And I think that morality is really within us. And I think that when we tap into that, and we're not doing something because somebody else says so, then we're more in tune with that. But I also, part of what hit me as you were telling that story is that you came to it green. You know, you started reading the Bible green. And I just think, wow, how refreshing that must be, because I still, even in my journaling the last few days, I'm talking about the veil that I'm trying to get through when I hear God or Jesus or something that feels very constrictive to me, and I don't think was ever meant to be constrictive. And we can do that with anything. It's not about Christianity. It's not about Jesus. We can do it to Buddha. We can do it to Muhammad. We can do it to pretty much anything. We can label. I mean, we see this
make
in
assumptions.
Make assumptions or put things in boxes, and also rely on external interpretations instead of the inner wisdom. So I believe you absolutely answered the question, and I believe it was beautifully done. So let's talk a little bit about that wisdom, because we've talked about, that's part of my focus. I think that's when we met at the seminar we were both a part of, it's what attracted the invitation for having you on the podcast. And I love all of the different perspectives. So how do you define wisdom?
Wow, yeah. So I started by saying it's such a complex, well, it's not complex, the right word. It's, if you think of a diamond, okay, a diamond is multifaceted and is beautiful. And you can look at the diamond through different angles, and the angles you look at, you get a different perspective. So I'd start off by talking about wisdom as timeless truths that can connect the best version of who you are and who you long to be. Okay, that's one, if you like, that's one facet of the diamond. Another facet of the diamond would be that sweet spot between a healthy skepticism and a gullible naivety. Okay. So it's something between childlike innocence about life, but at the same time being realistic about all the mess that there is within us and outside us. So there's that side. And ultimately, I would say wisdom is, I think we come to wisdom because we think about it in terms of, I've got a problem I need solving. I don't know what to do. And it's particularly in our day and age, with technology, we have so much choices, we have so much data, we have so much information. So I want to get my problems fixed. Okay.
Now.
How? And I need some wisdom to get this fixed. Yeah.
Yeah. Right now.
Right now. Because I then want to get on with my own agenda. Okay. Right. Then move on. But actually, wisdom won't allow you to do that. because I think ultimately at the center of the universe is a person, and that person is knowable. And my conclusion has been, through my research and reading and understanding, is that wisdom is Jesus Christ. And it's that living relationship with him that is both eternal and in some amazing, mysterious way available to me right now through the power of his Holy Spirit. So that's, you know, that's the more you think about it, the more mind-boggling and glorious it is, because it's this connection between mystery and glory and the wonders of the universe, and then my humdrum life, you know, where I've got to, you know, do the washing, and I've got to put the rubbish out, and I've got to, you know, write emails and things like that. You know, it's keeping that, you know, eternal perspective. You know, so I'm not a human being with a spiritual existence. I'm a spiritual being with a human existence.
Mm-hmm.
So there you are. That's another long answer to a very short question again.
Oh, that's what takes us deep, and that's the whole idea. Do we dare to dig deep into these things that sometimes we think they're beyond understanding, and when we want answers, I like to think of the difference between wisdom and knowledge, or wisdom and data. Wisdom is really more about sitting with questions and allowing the questions to work on us, rather than having, you know, the answer pop up and win a prize, or, you know, be able to. The wisdom has maybe an agenda that is much higher than we think about in our physical existence, right? I believe there's an agenda, and it's greatest and highest good. Whereas we have this very limited view from the physical body, oftentimes, without understanding. But I know there are two things that come to my mind about your answer, and one is a quote, because I use imagination a lot, and the imagination, I think, is what connects us with the divine. It's like, if we can't even imagine something outside of ourselves, then there is no bridge. And yet we've relegated imagination to fairy tales and things of childhood. But there's a quote by the author of Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
I can't remember his name, and I just posted the quote on my Old Soul.
No. Oh, the book is Jonathan Livingston, but the author, yeah, go on, yeah. It's not Richard Bach.
It is Richard Bach. Yes, Richard Bach. He says, imagination is an old soul. And I just love that. But then I was reading Neville Goddard too, and he's kind of a mystic Christian. And there are people, I mean, he has some controversial things, especially for very, very literalist Christians. But he's basically saying that Jesus Christ is your imagination. He is your connection to the divine. So it's an interesting approach, right? And I don't have the answer, and this isn't about saying yes he is or yes he isn't, but like allowing ourselves the freedom to explore that, not in the sense of Jesus Christ is my footstool, or is my way to manifest. You know, I don't believe in that at all, that Jesus Christ is just a tool for us, but really getting into this whole idea of the connection between imagination, wisdom, the divine, greater and higher good. And I think it's really what attracted me to, and I have to be honest, I didn't finish your book. Reading on the PDF was a little bit difficult, but
all right. That's okay. No worries. Yeah.
So you've said that Jesus Christ for you is the embodiment of wisdom, and your book is called Dancing with Wisdom. Let's talk about the dancing for a moment.
Yes. So if you think about dancing, it encapsulates so much. There's something about joy. There's something about freedom. There's something about spontaneity. And when you've got a dance partner, you have to, as it were, be very aware of what they're doing and the moves they're making. And you can find a way to, as it were, respond to their moves, and you can make something really beautiful with that. Now, in life, in a sense, we've already got a music that's playing, and a lot of that music is sort of cynicism, confusion, complexity, chaos, contradiction. lots of seas. It was like that, before we had COVID, and it's even more so now. And really, rather than music, it produces a noise. And I think, and unfortunately, that creates, I would say, rising levels of mental illness, rising levels of discontent and frustration. That's what is doing. Wisdom, in a sense, I would say is quite the opposite. Wisdom is, in a sense, it's finding a meaning, a melodic line, a theme, a harmony through all that mess, and saying, actually, there is someone who is in control. There is you don't have to fight this world with all the terrible things going on. There is someone who is making sense of it. He is knowable. And it's literally, you can begin to dance with it. Now, there's a huge amount of mystery involved in this. But there's something glorious and wonderful. But also, this is beyond your capacity to control or measure or know where it's going. That's why, I've called it a sacred quest, because on a quest is a journey to achieve something that's difficult, or is to search for something that's difficult to find, or achieve something that to achieve. It's not easy to get to. And so, but it engages your whole being, all of who you are. And that's what makes it exciting and scary at the same time, because it's about giving up control. Because again, when you're dancing, you might want to go off and do something completely different, but you've got to be aware of what your partner is doing in that dance.
Yeah.
And I think the Trinity brings us into that divine dance, the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And it's amazing, because the living God becomes knowable as we engage with him. But we've got to get past all that noise that's within us and that's outside of us. And as you're saying, with the imagination, because we need a sanctified imagination that can deal with that. Because so often, if I think about my depression, for example, a lot of that, I think, was my imagination catastrophizing, going into negative, looking at the worst possible outcomes. And my mind was trained to do that.
Yeah.
But by God's grace, that's been unlearned over the years.
Yeah, I couldn't have said that better. I love that transition, right? It's like the double-edged sword, right? Which, if we know how to wield it, we know how to use it. In fact, I'm getting ready to talk about the power of the what if.
Right.
And when we're catastrophizing, it's a what if, but we're already acting as if. So that what if we're going towards the negative, is one side of the sword, and we're probably going to cut ourselves. But if we know how to wield it in a healthy way, that what if can be very positive. We can live into our potential, which I believe is the goal of your coaching with, you said bored and frustrated, successful people. So really debunking this notion that success is all about the money and the status. You're trying to add this wisdom piece so that they don't feel empty inside, with even surrounded by all the trappings of the material world.
Exactly, because I think we've been fed this lie, and we've allowed ourselves to believe it, that if I had, if I had more money, if I had the right relationship, if I had, you fill in the gaps, ... whatever, something external, then I would be, then I would have it made. But, you think about it, the fact, if you could tell our grandparents or great-grandparents what we can do now with technology, if you could say, Michelle, I can talk to you on the other side of the world, I can see you, we can have a conversation, we can record it, that can be beamed to loads of people around the world, and it doesn't even cost any, apart from the Wi-Fi connection, it costs hardly, it's practically free, and the things we can do, and the places we can go. They'd say, you're living in paradise. They would, if I could do, that'd be amazing. That 100 years ago, if you wanted to travel somewhere, letters would take months to arrive. You'd hear nothing for months and months.
Oh, but they were cherished. Oh, were they cherished?
Well, I think that's one of the other big lies, isn't it? There's this thing about the good old days. In the old days, it was better. And I become more convinced that there never were any good old days. They were just another set of problems. Every generation, it's that famous Charles Dickens thing. It was the best of times and it was the worst of times.
Yes.
And where are you going to focus your attention? If you want to look for the arguments why it's the worst of times, you'll be right. You
Yes.
look for the argument to why it's the best of times, you'll be right as well. Now, where are you going to focus? Use your imagination. Again, I suppose, going back to your earlier comment. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I was going to go back to the noise you were talking about and the being stuck in that. Are you familiar with the root word of cacophony? You know the word cacophony, yes?
I don't like cacophony. I don't know the root word. No,
The root is actually K-A-K-A, kaka, and it means defecation. So it is literally the noise. It is literally the noise of, wallowing in the muck and the mire. And to bring ourselves back to the melody, I think that you're talking about with Dancing with Wisdom, is to lift ourselves out of the muck and the mire. And that to me is that not transcendental in and of itself?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I think that because there is so much negativity around us. You can talk about climate change. You can talk about the way, wars and the way people are treating each other and politics. And that's all cacophony, as it were. Yes. But is there a song of the universe that we need to connect with and learn to dance to?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about your 4Ds, and they aren't dancing, although the 4Ds make up the dancing. Your book is structured around the 4Ds of discovering, desiring, developing, and deepening in wisdom. Tell me a little bit about that structure and how you happened upon that.
Yeah, so if we start with the discovering, I think so often we've been chasing the wrong things. We've been looking. The first step, I think, is discovering actually what I need is wisdom. It's not, what I think will bring me happiness. I mean, again, I'm not saying they're not important. They are vitally important. If you're, if you haven't got a job and you can't make ends meet, yes, you need finance. But but all the studies show you reach a certain level of material wealth, and more money does not bring more happiness. Okay, and people joke and they say things like, I know money doesn't buy happiness, but I'm sure, but if I had $1 million, I'm sure I'd disprove them. People make comments like that.
Yeah, or tell that to the man on the street, right? Tell that to the homeless person.
Yeah. And so, and all the effort and research and energy go. It's a bit like that joke about there's a guy who's there's a drunk who's underneath a lamppost, and somebody comes up to him and he's searching. He says, what are you looking for? He says, I'm looking for my keys. He said, but the joke, I'm looking for other people who don't know. He says, I'm looking for my car keys. And he says, oh, I'll help you. So he helps him about 5 minutes. He says, we're not finding it. Where was the last place you saw your car keys? He says, oh, well, the last place I saw them was in that bush over there, but where it's all dark. But he says, well, why are we looking under the lamppost? He says, because there's more light over here.
That's right.
And there's something about that, is that we focus on all those things that we think will bring us happiness, because engaging with God and the divine, yes, it is mysterious, but it involves a part of me having to give up my control. And so I would rather go where everybody else is looking. So that need to discover. Okay? Once I discover that, now I've got to desire it, because I think this is the other fascinating thing about wisdom, is that wisdom doesn't come to the most fortunate or the most intelligent. It comes to those who are most determined to find it. So I've got to begin using imagination again, begin to think, actually, my life is much more than just what I see in front of me. We're talking earlier on that I have all these desires and longings that this world can't fulfill. I need to desire, I need to make sure that my desires are for the right thing. So desiring wisdom, so discovering, desiring. And I talk in the book about that, we need wisdom for our heart, we need wisdom for our minds, and we need wisdom for our lives. So wisdom that can really take my whole being, all my emotions and energy, but also intellectually satisfy me, and then make sense of the world around me, and then to develop it. And developing wisdom is talks about managing your ego and my desire to control, my desire to not think too much of myself, but also at the same time not to think too little of myself as well. There's that healthy balance in between. And then removing my idols, and idols in terms of things that I make too important. And we see that again, money, sex, and power are the classic ones, but they can also be good things. I've got a book coming out, and somebody challenged me, and she was quite right to say, you just have to make sure the book doesn't become an idol, it doesn't become too important to you, because wisdom is far bigger than my book. This is only my scratching on the surface of it. It's a tool. But even good things like family or being liked and appreciated, they can become too important. And so how do I recognize when I'm allowing them to be too dominant in my lives? Because I become very needy. I begin to start feeling insecure and defensive. And so managing my ego, removing my idols, and then challenging my assumptions, those limiting beliefs that hold me back and that stop me reaching my full potential. So that's discovering, desiring, developing, and then deepening in wisdom. And there we talk about defining wisdom with the divine, the ultimate creator God. Again, not, as you're talking on, not a boxed in God that's very constrictive and is there to try and, what's the word? Be a killjoy who doesn't want me to be happy. No, the God who loves me eternally and has good things for me and longs for me to be in relationship with him. So defining it with him, what wisdom is. And then, but that's going to, in a sense, involve my whole being. There's a lovely Hebrew word, which is shalom, which means complete well-being. And there's somebody called Andrew Parnham who's got this lovely definition, which really resonates with me, which is wholeness for the whole person, for the whole of life, extending to the whole of the cosmos. Can you imagine that? Wholeness for the whole person, for the whole of life, extending to the whole cosmos. I mean, that's worth getting excited about. And then, and then deepening in that wisdom. That's, if you like, that's a summary of the book. You don't need to read it now. You've got the whole thing.
Oh, I'm sure there are many nuggets in there that are worth pulling out. You did say that there's some significance on your book being released today, March 17th. What is that significance?
Yeah, so it basically dates back to 17th March 2014, and I had a very good friend, Bunty Abhishek Banerjee. He was like a sort of younger brother to me. He came to the UK, I still can't remember the exact date now, but whenever it was, in the early 2000s sometime, and he became a part of our church, and he had a spiritual awakening himself, and I had the privilege of baptizing him, and he then later on got married and went to India. And I happened to be in India in the last week of his life, not that obviously either of us knew it. And 17th of March was actually the day that he tragically died. I spoke to him that morning, and then I got a phone call from his wife that night, a kind of phone call that you never, that you just never want to hear. She basically said to me, her first words were to me, if somebody's heart's not beating for 3 hours, can they still be alive? And then through the rambling, I worked out that he died. And that really, I mean, as anything does, that knocked me for 6. But, the whole circumstances around that I should have chosen to go to India in the last week of his life. We had a very deep conversation. He died on the Monday, or on the Saturday night. He'd said to me, when you get to London, I want you to ring me, which was a very weird thing to say. And I said, well, that's going to be really late for you, but okay, I'll ring you. And then I spoke to him on a Monday, and he'd given a gift to one of my daughters of an SLR camera, because I just had it in conversation, was telling him she was interested in photography, and he suddenly said spontaneously, I wanted to have his camera, which is quite, I was a bit embarrassed by it, but anyway, that was fine. And she spoke to him that morning, and then she put the phone down, and I rang him back and said, thanks for everything, keep in touch. And you get a phone call like that. And then I was so not for sick. I basically got on a flight the very next day and flew all the way back. I flew all the way to Calcutta for his funeral to get to that. But, it makes you question, what am I living for? Where am I going? What am I doing that has any significance or meaning? And goodness me, how fragile life is. I need to make the most of every day. And what is life all about? And in many ways, there's, and I say this in the dedication, I quote John chapter 12, verse 24, where Jesus says, very truly I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls on the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. And I say, dear reader, my prayer is that this book will help germinate a seed of supernatural transformation and change within your life, surpassing all expectations. Because Bunty had such a profound impact as a friend, it would be good to know and begin to make sense of his tragic loss, as this single seed produces many seeds. And so it seemed very fitting, in a way, in a tribute to Bunty and our friendship, that at the 7 years of his death, that this book would be released and would bring life and hope and light to many people, where there is, so much darkness and discouragement and disappointment and even death. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think that too, when we can really open our eyes and acknowledge those things, then our life can be fuller. I think we ignore death far too much in Western culture, and
And COVID has obviously brought that to mind in ways that,
yeah,
none of us could have imagined at all, really.
yeah. So really, the question is, are we going to dance?
Yes,
Yeah,
with life in all its mystery and complexity. But
yeah,
but there are, I think, I hope Dancing with Wisdom is showing that there are answers for our restless hearts, questioning minds, and disordered lives, because that's what we have: restless hearts, questioning minds, disordered lives. But there is someone who can bring harmony and wholeness to that. Yes.
yeah. That's beautiful. Doing the inner work. Well, we are running
Yeah.
out of time, so.
Yeah.
Before I get emotional with your beautiful words there, our restless hearts, I could so identify with that. I want to let our listeners know where they can find you. They can find you at drsunil.com. That's Dr. abbreviated DRSUNIL.com. For more information about the book launch, you can go to drsunil.com/launch. On Facebook, Dr. Sunil Raheja, and on Instagram, Sunil K. Raheja. And pretty much just like it sounds, Raheja. So did I miss anything as far as where to find you before I ask you the final question?
Yeah, so that's right. So drsunil.com, you can get the introduction to the book. You can download that, and I think on that site as well, you'll also get a link to it's on Amazon, basically. It'll be on Amazon, Dancing with Wisdom. If you just search for Dancing with Wisdom, Sunil Raheja, you'll find it. Yeah.
Beautiful. So I suppose that the last question that we can talk about here as we close is, what will wisdom give me?
What will wisdom give me? I suppose I'd turn that around, is that what will it not give you that is wholesome, good, lovely, beautiful? What will it not give you? I think it'll give you everything your heart desires and more. I mean, Paul says in Ephesians, he says that God, who can do more than we can ask, think, or imagine. And I think ultimately we were created for a relationship with the living God. And I've very much come to the conclusion that's through a relationship through Christ. Because in Christ, I know I'm completely loved. In a sense, God says to me in Christ that there's something wrong with you that is so flawed and broken that I had to send Jesus on the cross to die for you. But as a result, but you are so loved, okay, that through that sacrifice, I can accept and love you unconditionally. So there's nothing that can take you out of my hands. And that brings enormous security. So I don't live now for approval, but I live from approval. I know that nothing can snatch me from his hand. And I know that ultimately, whatever life has for me, because there's a lot I don't know. There's a lot that I can't, fathom or make sense of. But I know the one whose hand I can hold. And his presence with me is available to me in the here and now, in all its mystery and glory. I think, sorry, I know we're getting out of time, but the way I've heard it put, which has been resonating with me recently, is that if God is infinite, okay, infinity plus nothing, okay, is no more than infinity plus everything. So he who has God and nothing has no more than he who has no less than he or she who has God and everything. That's, I think, the answer to your question. What will wisdom give me?
Yeah. Wow. There's some
goodness and love. Yeah.
Words to contemplate on. And I really have to say, we talked about this a little bit before when we talked some of my challenges with religion and dogma and doctrine. And I love your approach to a loving God, because so many preach a fear where you at any given moment you're looking over your shoulder, or you can do this and you can do that. And even I have some beautiful friends that are like, well, what about this? And I was pointed back to this Old Testament verse. I said, well, if you're here now and you believe that I think they had talked about, well, what about these laws? And I said, well, the final two laws were to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. So if that has replaced everything else, why do we keep going back? But I don't want to get into that now. I just want to say, I love your take. I so appreciate you being on the podcast. And my podcast isn't exclusively Christian. So I really appreciate you sharing your views because there is wisdom there and it's beautiful. And I would encourage anyone interested in Dr. Sunil's work, I would encourage you to reach out to him if you are feeling bored and frustrated for all of your outwardly successes. Check into the Dancing with Wisdom coaching program. Again, thank you. So honored to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. It's been a privilege to be here. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. This has been Old Soul Sojourn with Dr. Sunil Raheja. My name is Michelle Janae with Old Soul Archaeology. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, dig deep.